Namaste Sarasvati Devi Kauravani Prachari Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Prachacharishitari.
There are different means for things not to enter into our life. For example, if we do not want to progress spiritually, we will avoid associating with the devotees of the Lord. Because if we associate with devotees of the Lord, we will enter in contact with the glories of Krishna. And the glories of Krishna are wonderful. Once we touch them, we never go back behind. Why? Because they have an effect which brings what we call devotion in the life of a person. Devotion is similar to the sun. And furtive activity, activity done in a false feeling, which is connected to identification with matter, with the body, because it does not allow us to understand, to see the feeling, what we are truly. This is why, if we want to get out of suffering, we must engage in devotional service, because any relationship in this world which is not made to the service of Krishna, for the pleasure of Krishna, brings gradually suffering. Everything exists by Him and for Him. The soul is an energy of the Lord. The body, which is made of material elements, they are the energies of the Lord. Everything is a creation of the Supreme Lord. Everything exists by Him and also for Him, because He is also in everything, and in between everything and in everything. So as soon as we live through illusion in this world, we create a reaction. In proportion, there's a reaction. This is why the living entity, he becomes conditioned by his own fault, by his false perception. In fact, the Lord, He lets everyone free. But you have the choice to deliver yourself, or you have the choice to condition yourself. It's really important. This is why to hear from sadhus, it is just like meeting a doctor. For example, in this world, there are living beings that learn how to cure illnesses. But do they heal themselves from the most powerful of sickness, false illnesses? They will be absorbed to heal the bodily illness, but they will forget to heal from the energy of ignorance, from tamas. The greatest illness is the forgetfulness of our eternal reality. This is why we can be absorbed in many things. To take care of people, to be afraid for living entities, but we always forget our reality is crazy, no? Let us look for a mother, for example, always in anxiety for her child. She constantly forgets her reality to take care of her child. Maya is very powerful. Still, at the time of death, the relationship stops. Forgetfulness comes. It's automatic. And the mother, she takes the birth as a child, and the one who has the child absorbs again in the same condition. It's an unending cycle.
impossible à échapper.
It's very difficult to get out of this.
Parce que l'énergie
Because the
matérielle,
material energy, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta explains, she acts in two ways.
de deux façons.
Two
Elle
ways.
fait souffrir l'être
She
vivant.
makes the living entity
Elle lui
suffer,
fait croire
and
qu'elle
she
va
makes him
être en
believe
meilleure position.
that he is in the
En fait,
best
actuellement,
position.
tous, on pense que
All
nous
of
sommes en
us,
meilleure position.
we think
Pourtant,
that
nous
we're in the
souffrons.
best position, still we suffer.
Qui ne peut pas dire qu'il ne souffre pas?
Who cannot say
Par
he does not
exemple,
suffer?
je
For
donne un exemple.
example, I'll give you an example.
Les gens tombent amoureux.
People, they fall in love.
Ils souffrent de ça,
They
mais
suffer
terriblement.
from this, but terribly.
Ils savent
They know
être
that
tombés amoureux d'une
to
personne,
fall in
c'est ce
love
qu'il y a de plus- c'est
with
quelque
a
chose
person
de
is the
tellement
worst.
important que
It
ça
makes you
s'en
suffer so
rend
much, but still they cannot
D'accord?
stop doing it
Voilà.
again and
Pas de
again
solution.
because they have no solution.
Ils n'ont pas la connaissance.
They don't have knowledge. Why they suffer?
Donc ils sont obligés de recommencer.
So they are obliged to start again.
C'est dingue, quand même.
It's crazy, no?
C'est pour ça que Brahma,
This is why Brahma, he explains
l'être humain,
that the living being,
pense que sa
the
souffrance,
symptom is that he thinks his suffering is happiness. He runs after his suffering. It's crazy, no?
la cause de sa souffrance,
The cause of his suffering, he thinks it's happiness. He's attached to it. And it never gives him happiness.
C'est pourquoi,
This is why,
à un moment,
at some point, intelligence must come. The solution must come because Krishna is our friend.
qui nous laisse libres
Although he lets us free
d'être dans cette illusion,
to be in this illusion
courir après l'illusion.
and running after illusion, he observes us. He's there in our heart.
Et quand on souffre, qu'est-ce
And
qu'on
when we
fait?
suffer, what we do, sometimes we pray.
J'ai besoin de toi.
I need you.
Quand on va pas bien,
But it's just when we don't go well.
tout va bien,
When we think everything goes well, we let go.
dès qu'on oublie un peu
But as soon as we forget a little bit, then
la vie sans Krishna,
life without Krishna is just like
on fait toujours la même
a problem. We turn in a circle. We always do the same thing. Prahlad said it's just like eating our own vomit. Vomit, it's what? We did this thing, we vomit it
chose qu'elle nous a
because it gave us unsatisfaction, and we are forced to eat it again to do the same experience life after life.
tous ici, on a fait ces mêmes choses des milliards.
All here of us here, we did the same things billions of times, and we come back.
Donc à un moment,
So at some point,
à force de revenir,
as we come back,
de se
because the gain, the remembrance of Krishna is never lost, the experience of Krishna is never lost,
à un moment, il y a un
at some
processus
point,
d'accumulation.
there's a process of accumulation.
On sert Krishna,
The more we serve Krishna,
plus
the more
notre
our consciousness,
cette relation avec Krishna.
this relationship with Krishna increases.
Donc, à un moment, elle prend de
And then at some point it takes more and more place in our life.
Et qu'est-ce qu'il va faire?
And what will happen?
Plus l'amour de Krishna
The more love of Krishna
remplit notre
will fill our
vie,
life,
la fausse
the more the
conception.
false conception will disappear.
C'est un processus
It's a
de
process
remplacement.
of replacement.
Quand on est un pur matérialiste,
When we're a pure
on
materialist,
regarde sans-
we see the world without Krishna.
et plus on sert
And the
le
more
Seigneur,
we serve the Lord,
devient
the
en-
more this world comes filled with Krishna.
Donc, quand c'est moitié-moitié,
So when it's half-half,
comme
we
la
call that
dévotion,
just like mixed
là,
devotion.
on voit
That means we
qu'il y a
see,
quand même des choses dans
but there are
notre
still
vie.
things in us, desires, illusions.
Mais plus on va servir
But the
le
more
Seigneur
we will
suprême,
serve the Supreme Lord,
commencer
the more
à
He
se
will start
manifester
to manifest Himself
d'une manière tangible.
in a tangible way through the chanting, especially through the
On
chanting.
peut avoir l'expérience de
We can have the experience of Krishna through the chanting.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur,
Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains,
tenez-vous bien avec la tête.
please hold yourself well, Lalita Saki.
Comme ça, on dort.
If you're like that in this position, you will fall asleep. Put you, take a chair, but if we're not positioned well, sitting, then that's the reason why people they fall asleep. If you're like that, listening to the class in this way, it's like chanting the holy name, being lying on the floor, we will sleep. So the point is that when we chant the Maha Mantra, gradually we will chant first with listening and respect, by understanding that I am the soul, and that the chanting the names of Krishna, is the Lord Himself. And we see truly, we start chanting with respect and we listen. Listening, it enters, the holy name enters into the ear and goes into the region of the heart and purifies us all the activities, all the wrong conceptions of the living entity. Already, if there's not this respect, then it doesn't come. But at some point, when the chanting acts truly, so he will have an attraction for the chanting. And it is explained, this attraction, Rupa Goswami explains, it is so powerful that we obtain a taste that is difficult even to explain. Because materially speaking, nothing can attract in this way. He says it's like wanting to have millions of ears, millions of tongues. So much there is taste. At this point, the living entity, what happens? He tastes so much pleasure that he asks himself how he was able, even one moment, to live without this pleasure, because everything becomes insignificant, even sexual pleasure, because everything is a perversion of this nectar. Because we look for something else because we are cut from this nectar. But as soon as this nectar comes back, it is just like we never had the experience of taste. Everything we have known before, it was just like everything was forgotten because it's so small compared to the taste of the holy name. So there automatically what happens? It will start to create an attachment in our heart. We'll start to think, oh, to be afraid that it leaves us. There'll be a fear, just like a materialist is afraid to lose something. But the only difference is that this fear is multiplied by billions of times, because the Lord is infinite, that even the smallest experience with the holy name is so deep that the fear, the anxiety of losing this nectar will actually in the heart of the living entity. And this is why there's such attachment to chant, such proximity with the chanting, such proximity. And then from there with the living entity, he doesn't have any more material desires, but just wanting to be a slave of this nectar of the holy name. It's a form of like a wonderful slavery, because we're ready to do everything to obtain it. Everything. Because only this can give us satisfaction. Once we experience this a little bit, everything disappears. Everything. We forget everything. It's too strong. And then that's when Krishna starts to reveal the glories of his form, of his qualities, of his pastimes. And the living entity, through this taste, he obtains his spiritual senses manifest themselves. Because we cannot taste the holy name through material senses. It is impossible. So, as taste comes gradually, we can understand that the spiritual senses manifest themselves. So, the more the experience with the chanting will be efficient in our life, and the more the conception of material existence will leave us. And then the living entity becomes fixed in what we call Krishna consciousness. What is Krishna consciousness? It's the consciousness of who he is truly and of our relationship with Krishna. Before, we are a conditioned soul. What is a conditioned soul? It is that he doesn't know much. He doesn't know much about his reality. And since he is identified with a bodily conception, so what he does, he focuses the service on his bodily needs. That's why by increasing, the more our consciousness of Krishna will increase, and the more our consciousness of bodily needs will diminish. So it is in proportion. That's why the more we advance spiritually, and the more our needs will change. One example. When we are materialist, we eat meat, we drink, we take drugs. What we prefer is to run after ladies, after men, etc. Run after position, fame. We all do that. We want to intoxicate ourselves, we want to be happy, we want to enjoy to exploit the environment,
on veut
or
échapper à la
we
souffrance.
want to escape suffering.
On court pour échapper
We
à la
run
souffrance. On
to
essaie
escape
de courir après le
suffering.
bonheur.
We try to run after
On fait
happiness.
que ça.
We only do this.
C'est la réalité.
This is the reality.
Mais lorsque
But when
notre conscience
our
spirituelle
consciousness,
se manifeste,
spiritual
ces
consciousness
deux
manifests
états
itself,
deviennent oubliés.
these two states become
Chercher le
forgotten
plaisir
to look for pleasure
et esquiver la souffrance.
and to escape suffering.
On obtient un état
We obtain a state
de réalité,
of reality,
un vrai sentiment.
a true feeling,
Un sentiment
a
qui est
feeling
relié avec
which
le bonheur
is connected to the happiness of the Lord.
et on ressent dans notre
And we feel in our
qu'on est
heart
complètement différent
that we're completely different
de cette carcasse.
from this
De tout qui
covering,
est cette carcasse.
and that everything that connects to this body
Et que
itself,
simplement les
and that
êtres qui
simply
sont
the
autour de
living
nous,
beings
c'est le
around us,
résultat de nos activités passées.
it is the result of their previous
On
activities.
voit par exemple dans la
We
vie
see,
de
for
Jad
example, in the life of Jada Bharat.
Jad Bharat,
Jad Bharat,
c'était un grand sage,
he was a
un
great
roi,
sage, a king,
un roi fameux,
a famous king,
qui était très élevé dans la dévotion.
who was very elevated in
Il avait
devotion.
renoncé.
He renounced to everything.
C'était un empereur.
He was an emperor.
Et dans ces temps-là,
And in those days,
il y avait tellement
there
d'opulence
was
sur la terre.
such opulence on earth. Now it's nothing. Now it's just like there's no opulence nowadays. But at this time, there was so much opulence.
Mais il a tout renoncé.
But he renounced
Son
everything
désir,
because his desire,
sa pureté était
his
telle
purity was
que
such
tout ce
that
royaume,
even all of this kingdom, it was
parce que son amour
insignificant for him because his love for Krishna was increased so much that anything else had no value. So he gave his kingdom
donc, à son à
to
sa progéniture,
to his
il a renoncé.
sons,
Il a été dans la forêt.
and he renounced and he went into the forest.
Il voulait juste
And then in the forest, he could just absorb himself in the Supreme Lord.
Mais
But
par l'arrangement du Seigneur,
by the arrangement of the Lord,
un jour,
one day
une biche
there was a doe
attendait un enfant.
that was waiting for
Elle arrivait.
a baby deer that was drinking at the water.
Sage libéré,
The liberated sage, it is explained,
même les animaux
even the
sont
animals
bien à côté d'eux.
feel good next to
Les
them,
animaux sauvages.
even the wild animals.
Mais à un moment, il y a un lion
But at some point there was a lion
qui avait
that started to like shout, you know.
Et là, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
And then what happened? Naturally, the deers they were afraid.
Elle a voulu,
So the mother deer, when she heard that, she wanted to cross the river,
mais en fin de compte,
but finally
elle s'est noyée.
she drowned
En
herself,
même temps, naissance à son enfant.
and she gave at the same time birth to her little baby doe.
Barat,
And then Jad Bharat,
comme il était une grande âme,
since he was a great soul, when he saw a person in distress,
là, donc,
like in the form of a doe,
en aide, en fait.
he came to help this doe,
Et donc, il l'a élevé.
and
Naturellement, il est devenu comme sa mère, comme son père.
he was like a father for the fawn, you know.
Et graduellement,
He started to protect the
il
fawn,
a aussi,
and
faire attention, bien qu'il méditait,
he was trying to be careful. Although he was meditating on the Supreme Lord, he had to be careful for the fawn,
il s'est pris d'affection.
and the fawn grew up, and then he became affectionate, and then the attachment became grower. It's very subtle. We change,
Puis à côté,
and then
mais en fait, on chante pas.
we chant, but actually we don't chant. We are absorbed in other material things. It's not chanting. And then at some point, what happened?
Il est plus absorbé dans
He was more absorbed in the fawn than in his own practice.
il pensait même que
He was even thinking that the fawn was his mercy,
c'était grâce à lui qu'il avait tout.
that it was because of him that he left everything. It was a pure illusion. He was seeing the fawn everywhere.
Et à un moment, le fond a disparu.
And at some point, the fawn disappeared.
Et là, c'était la grande
And then
lamentation.
there was great lamentation. He was
C'est
crying.
ma grande infortune.
This is my great infortune,
Ah,
the Lord.
voilà, il pleurait, il divaguait
He was crying. He was bewildered.
complètement. Et à cause de ça, il est tombé dans la
And because of that, he fell in a hole,
et mourir.
and he was about to die. And then the fawn came back just at this time. And then he absorbed himself in the fawn, and he left his body.
Mais
But Krishna explains that if we think about him about the time, it's the last thinking at the time of death that creates our destination for our next life. And this we cannot change that. At the time of death, we cannot say you'll be thinking about Krishna. What you have the most in your heart, you'll think about that and you'll take birth accordingly. That's why this world is dangerous. Because what we think at the time of death is our attachment. Our attachment comes back. And you continue your cycle of birth and death. And what happened to Jada Bharat? He took birth as a fawn in his next life. The only thing that was different was that when we were like a mature devotee of the Lord, we remember our previous life. The ordinary being doesn't remember anything of his previous lives because they did not practice. But the one who practiced, the Lord made for one to remember what he did in his previous life, which means he reconnects directly to his state of his previous life. The state of slavery he got as being a child, it's forgotten. And then when he took birth as a fawn, what he did, he left his mother immediately. He was close to, he stayed close to an ashram of sages, and he was living like an ascetic. He was only eating dry things. He was doing like ascetic things in the body of a fawn. And he was waiting to leave his body because he could not come back to Krishna in this condition. So he took the condition, a new condition in the family of Brahmanas. He took birth again. And then what he did? He played the madman because he absolutely didn't want to be cheated. Because as soon as you're kind with someone in this world, you attach yourself. And you forget your eternal nature. Parents, brothers, like this. All of this is to make you forget your eternal relationship. The material energy gives you a false conception, and we fall into it. We don't want to hurt such person, do this or that. We're in a trap. It's extremely difficult. If you want, for example, to practice spiritual life, your parents will tell you, to a certain level they'll be happy, but at some point you need to forget the illusion. They don't agree. As soon as it's good for them, there's no problem. But if you go too far, you see it's not so simple. As soon as Krishna will come too much in your life, people who are attached to you because you give them pleasure, then they don't see that same pleasure anymore. It's not so simple. And Jada Bharat knew this. So he did just like he was a madman. When he had to do something, he was doing the opposite. And his father was a pious Brahmana. He was always trying to educate him in spiritual life. And Jada Bharat, I was reading, after going to the toilet to do this and that, he was doing all the opposite. Instead of washing his hands, after he was washing his hands before. And then he was in a state of, that seemed like he was a madman. So we asked him to take care of the cows because he was like an animal. He was really strong. And as long as his father was there, everything was going good. But when his father left his body, his brothers, they started to neglect him completely. They were going to give him rot food. They were treating him very badly. And Jada Bharat, never. He was rebelling against a so-called injustice because he saw everything like the mercy of the Supreme Lord. He was explaining that a liberated soul never becomes angry. He is always. He's always satisfied in himself. And so naturally what happened? One day, there were brigands, thieves, that was offering a sacrifice to Goddess Kali. It is explained, the Acharyas explained, that these thieves, they had no knowledge truly, because it was a sacrifice. So they were sacrificing human beings. Yeah, it is explained. Human sacrifices. So they were looking for animal man. It's called the animal man. Like an animal man to sacrifice. And when they saw Jadabara, they said, he's the perfect idiot. He's strong like an animal, but he's idiot like an animal. So we should sacrifice him. And Jadabharat, although he was conscious about what was happening, he was not able to fight the gesture of the thieves. And they presented him to the goddess Kali. But since Jadabharat was a great devotee of the Lord, it is explained that Kali did not appreciate that he was doing wrong to a pure devotee. So she came out of the altar and she started to cut the heads of the thieves. So Jadabharat, after this bloody theater, he left on the road. And there he saw a king. And the king was on the palanquin. He was transported on a palanquin. And unfortunately, one of the porters hurt himself, so they was looking for another one. And they saw that Jadabharat, who was strong, and they wanted to ask him to transport. But as he was transporting, sometimes it will disturb, the palanquin. And then the king said, who is disturbing the palanquin? So he could have killed someone for such thing, disturbance. But they were afraid and they say, so they say, it's a disturbance. And they started to chastise Jadabharat. And after, it was doing the same thing. So the king came down and he was furious, ready to chastise. But it's not like I can decide whether you live or die. And then Jadabharat, he started to speak. The reality is that why there were these disturbances is because he was looking everywhere on the ground if there will be no insects, not to walk on living entities and kill them. So automatically, it was creating disturbances. But when the king came down, he did this thing. He told him that who is a king, who is a servant. One day I can be on the throne. One day I can hold the palanquin. All of this is created by the reactions of our previous activities. And then Jadabharat started to speak about the nature of the soul. And since the king was pious, he realized he did a grave mistake, that he was a great sage. And he fell at his feet and asked for forgiveness. So, the meeting with sadhus can be done in so many positions. And we see that Jadabharat, the king Bharat, although he attained the fullness of devotional service, although he was tested by the Lord, his consciousness never was destroyed. Life after life, he kept his consciousness in the same way. When we cultivate devotional service, never our consciousness is destroyed. What you have accomplished in this life will be given back in the next life. And today, if you're here, it's because you have already practiced. So the more you will practice, the more in your next life, you'll be able to go further. But it is difficult to abandon everything. You could say, but why? Imagine yourself if I would tell you, you're a soul, you're not a body. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? You're an illusion. Uh, Abandon yourself. Most people, they will run. We know, for example, the life of Jesus. The merchant says, what can I do to attain the kingdom? And then Jesus said, abandon everything and come with me. It's not possible when you're attached. It is impossible. So we must engage our attachments. That's why Krishna, he taught the Bhagavad Gita. He saw Arjuna in this situation. Arjuna could not fight because in front there were personalities that were connected to his family, to his attachments. So what did Krishna explain to him? He said, all of this is an illusion. They're the soul. They are already dead. It's just a question of time. He even showed him the universal form and how they will all die. And once his illusion was gone, he was able to understand he had nothing to do with his attachments. That was when he was able to serve Krishna, not before. As long as we have attachments, we cannot serve the Lord. Because service means to be liberated, to go everywhere he wants. But the attachment is like a pole with a rope. You can move up to the end of the rope, and then there will be resistance. That's why someone who is attached to bodily conception cannot progress spiritually. Very little bit, just a little bit. It's very, very strong. These attachments for husband, for children, for brothers, for parents, for social position, for nation, you cannot progress if you're attached to this. This is why the solution is to serve Krishna in our environment, in our condition, and gradually the more Krishna will manifest in our life, the more detachment will come, up to the complete forgetfulness. And now we become pure devotees, and we can see the reality in living entities. We won't see a child or a woman, we see the truth because we will see our own truth. And then illusion stops at that point. There's no other thing, other choice. Either it's pure devotion, either it's material slavery. There's only two choices. I don't say this. You read the Bhagavad Gita, it's only this. You read the Bhagavatam, it's only this. It seems like cutting, but yeah, that's the reality. This is why the process of devotional service is the development of love of God. Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya. So the more this development of love of God enters into our life, the more the material illusion becomes dissipated. It is explained just like the sun. The Sukriti is just like the stars in the sky, just like a small light, and there's a remembrance. But when this faith increases and the sun starts to appear, so the darkness starts to dissipate, up to the point where there's no more darkness. It's gradual. But this meeting with Krishna is always done through the association, sadhu sangha. By the faith in pious activities, we have the benefit of meeting sadhus. And when we meet sadhus, we can understand this connection with Krishna, to be engaged in the process of devotional service, to purify our heart, and to become fixed, nishta in devotion. From there, the taste, attachment will manifest. So everything is a progress. And when it becomes full, so we are liberated completely from all suffering, and we taste love. Let us look in the life of Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur, he was he was whipped,
torturé.
tortured,
Et pourtant, il sentait rien.
and he was feeling nothing.
Même la souffrance
Even
matérielle
material
ne peut
suffering
même pas
cannot
occasionner,
give,
affecter la conscience d'un
cannot
saint.
influence the consciousness of a saint.
Une fois que vous devenez libéré,
Once you become liberated, you can be in any circumstance.
relationner avec
You
les
can
êtres,
relate to living
mais
entities,
plus rien ne
but
peut vous
nothing
toucher.
can touch you
Parce que votre attachement
because your
est lié
attachment
avec Krishna.
is with Krishna.
Votre relation est
Your
avec
relationship is with Krishna.
Krishna. Et là, vous devenez complètement
And then you become completely happy and satisfied.
Pourquoi?
Why?
Parce que vous êtes déjà conscient
Because you're already conscious
de votre éternité.
of your
Et
eternity.
la mort,
And that
ça affecte pas,
doesn't affect the living entity,
puisqu'il est déjà
since
conscient
he's already conscious
de sa réalité.
of his
Donc, quand il
reality.
meurt, c'est simplement
So when he
qu'il
dies,
revient à sa
it
réalité.
is simply that he goes back to his
Ça
reality.
se passe à l'intérieur.
It happens inside,
Et après, ça se manifeste
and
dans
after
le
it
monde.
manifests in the world of Krishna. It is something very mystical.
C'est pourquoi
This is why
on devrait prendre
we
au
should
sérieux
take seriously spiritual life.
C'est la chose la plus importante.
This is the most important thing.
En fait,
In
quand on
fact,
devient sérieux,
when we become
même lorsque
serious,
l'objet d'attachement
even when the object
choisit ses morts,
of attachments, we decide whether it's me or Krishna, we don't want to make the choice.
on ne pourrait pas le faire autrement.
We could not do otherwise but to go towards Krishna. It's impossible.
Même si on
Even
reste de l'attachement, on
if
va très bien,
we have attachment, we will drop a tear. We could not do otherwise. We will go towards Krishna.
quelque chose de mystique.
It's something that is mystical
Krishna,
because Krishna,
conception de Krishna,
the conception of Krishna is so beautiful.
est si doux,
Krishna is so
qu'elle est
sweet, so many qualities
personne qui connaît Krishna,
that nobody can
personne.
competition with Krishna. But as long as we don't have the experience, it is not possible. It is not possible
Notre expérience,
because our
c'est
experience
ce qui va faire notre dynamisme
is what
dans notre
will
vie.
create dynamism in our life.
C'est notre expérience qui fait
It is our experience that will
si quelqu'un
make us find the choice. If someone gives us happiness, we'll go towards that. But if we meet a person that gives us more happiness, you understood?
c'est logique.
It's
Donc l'expérience,
logical.
en ce moment,
So the experience now
c'est ce qui fait qu'on peut entendre
is what we can hear
l'accepter ou pas
something,
l'accepter.
accept it or not accept
Vous
it.
avez un peu d'expérience,
If you have the experience,
cette
you can
expérience,
accept this
même si on
experience,
vous en parle
even if we speak
d'une façon
to
plus
you
forte,
in a stronger way,
parce que vous savez que c'est là.
because you know it
Vous
is
êtes prêt à
true.
entendre ça.
So you're
Si vous n'avez
ready
pas
to
l'expérience,
hear
vous
it.
entendez quelque
But
chose
if you don't have the experience and you hear something
d'expérience, alors vous-
that goes against your experience, then you say, I don't want it.
C'est pour ça que
This is
si
why
quelqu'un vient dans un
if
temple
someone
pour
comes
écouter
into a temple to hear
la
pure philosophy of Vaishnavism, that means he
a
already practiced in his previous lives. Otherwise, he will not stay.
Vous comprenez?
You understood? You understand?
C'est impossible.
It is impossible.
C'est pour ça que Krishna explique
This is why Krishna explains the one who practiced,
jamais c'est perdu.
never it is lost.
Jamais c'est perdu.
Never it is lost. Never, never.
Mais celui qui n'a pas pratiqué,
But the one who did not practice,
automatiquement,
automatically,
c'est difficile.
it is difficult.
C'est amer.
It is bitter.
Amer comme du fiel.
It is bitter like iron.
C'est cela.
But it soothes from suffering. But the material pleasure, it makes us suffer terribly. For example, if you have a wife, she leaves you, and you spend years and years, and why did she leave me? And, but still, it was enjoyable, but it finishes wrong. So the next experience will be the same thing. Because even if it goes well, there'll be death, there'll be separation. It's the finality of this world. Only an idiot can say it's not true. Even if you find the ideal person, you will suffer unlimitedly. But devotional service at the beginning, it's bitter because it goes against all material conceptions and it limits you. And then you think it's nectar, but there's no limit because Krishna is the taste, and that's what is wonderful. And when you're in the middle, you go at the middle, then on the path, it gives you the same thing. So Krishna, he harmonizes everything. Everything becomes harmonized. Even before meeting Krishna, harmony comes. We don't suffer. We are happy. Krishna makes all the arrangements in our life. It's so easy. This is why we should have faith in Krishna and continue. Thank you very much.